Most people are completely unaware that Karl Marx, in his more hidden works, professes allegiance to the devil and expresses his desire to destroy God. Most people are familiar with Marx's work, the 1848 Communist Manifesto, which forms the theoretical basis for the communist movement. However, the truth is that he was actually paid to write this manifesto by the League of the Just, which was a German secret society which later evolved into the Communist Party. But who was behind the League of the Just? The Illuminati is a secret society founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776 with the ultimate goal of gradually overthrowing existing power structures to create a new world order. In the book Pawns in the Game, William Guy Carr reveals that the recently organized House of Rothschilds had hired and financed Weishaupt, a Luciferian, to adapt a set of ancient protocols called the Synagogue of Satan. These protocols aimed to destabilize society along political, racial, gender, social, and economic lines, encouraging groups to fight and weaken themselves, ultimately paving the way for a globalized government to seize control. The goal was that, by strategically infiltrating and controlling secret societies, especially the Freemasons and the League of the Just, the Illuminati sought to subvert existing power structures and gradually establish a one-world government. Their plans include complete control of the press, corruption of the youth, as well as the slow, discreet infiltration of all governments in the world, thus allowing them to initiate global shifts in power without being overtly recognized. The Illuminati aimed to disconnect people from their intuition and to promote a culture that placed materialism and hedonism over spiritual purity. The ensuing moral and sexual degeneracy would inevitably weaken the family unit, allowing children to be more easily indoctrinated by a totalitarian government. Rabbi Marvin Antelman revealed that the Rothschilds, who financially backed the Illuminati's goals, were Sabbatean Frankists. Sabbatean Frankism goes back to Jacob Frank, who was the religious successor of Sabbatai Zevi. In the year 1666, Zevi declared himself to be the Messiah of the Jewish people. Sabbatai Zevi and his followers believed that by engaging in sin, they could hasten the redemptive role of the Messiah. This doctrine was rooted in the belief that true salvation could only be attained by embracing suffering and sin as an act of defiance against God. In 1666, Redemption Through Sin, anthropologist Robert Sepper reveals that Sabbatai Zevi amassed over 1 million followers. Followers of this heretic ideology commonly hid their beliefs under the guise of other religions. Jacob Frank maintained the appearance of having converted to Catholicism along with his followers, ostensibly to gain protection from persecution. Similarly, Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati as discussed earlier, assumed the disguise of a Jesuit priest in order to hide his Luciferian beliefs. This strategy of hiding true religious beliefs under the guise of Jesuit Christianity allowed them to continue their heretic practices and spread their influence. Jacob Frank formed an alliance with Adam Weishaupt and Amschel Rothschild, leading to the creation of the Illuminati. The Marxist Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, which began in 1917 under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, led to the deaths of an estimated 20 million people, as the regime systematically eliminated political enemies and enforced brutal policies. Another Marxist revolution in China, led by Mao Zedong, led to the deaths of approximately 60 million people, making it one of the deadliest periods in human history. Whether it be in China or Russia, Marxist revolutions generally start the same way, by exploiting perceived social and economic inequalities along dimensions such as race, gender, or wealth. Revolutionary leaders often stress these inequalities to create division and unrest within a society, mobilizing discontented groups to overthrow existing governments. The movement often promises a fairer distribution of wealth under a reformed government, and while this sounds good on paper, in practice this frequently results in a more incompetent and corrupt regime. This new government, usually influenced by a small elite class, typically resorts to totalitarian measures to maintain control and stability. In John Robinson's Proofs of a Conspiracy, Robinson cites various Illuminati members who interestingly note that women are particularly susceptible to Marxist ideologies because of their natural empathy and sensitivity to issues of fairness and justice. This allegedly makes them more vulnerable to revolutionary propaganda that promises to address societal injustices. The idea is that by first having women buy into the new Marxist regime, men will have to inevitably soon follow after. While in Eastern nations like the Soviet Union and China, Marxist revolutions are characterized by explicit violence, mass killings, and the destruction of traditional culture, In the West, it has taken control more subtly through gradual subversion and indoctrination. After decades of investigation, researcher Trevor Loudon concluded that left-wing groups have targeted the U.S. for infiltration. Key sectors like politics, education, media, and business have shifted left due to strategically placed individuals. While the world celebrated the Cold War's end, communism was quietly taking over Western public institutions, preparing for the final struggle. In the 1990s, the U.S. government declassified the Venona files, revealing that over 300 Soviet spies had infiltrated the government during World War II, including high-ranking officials in the Roosevelt administration. The Venona files were only a glimpse into the full, still unknown extent of Soviet infiltration. Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB agent who defected to the West, revealed that only 10 to 15% of the KGB's resources were spent on traditional espionage, while the majority were dedicated to ideological subversion. He described the process of generational subversion in 4 stages. First, demoralization, which undermines an entire generation's perception of reality. Second, destabilization, where social chaos is created. Third, crisis, which triggers civil war, revolution, or foreign intervention. And finally, normalization, when the Communist Party fully takes control. Bezmenov explained that the concept of equality was manipulated to create unrest. Agents would promote egalitarianism, making people dissatisfied with their political and economic situations. This discontent would lead to activism and civil unrest, combined with economic deadlock, worsening labor and capital relations. The resulting instability would eventually lead to revolution or invasion by communist forces. Ioan Mihai Pacepa, the highest-ranking defector from the Soviet bloc, revealed how communist regimes use psychological warfare and disinformation to achieve the first stage of subversion. According to Pacepa, disinformation was designed to alter people's perceptions, so even when faced with the truth, they couldn't recognize or accept it, even when faced with direct evidence. Bezmenov explained that the first stage of ideological subversion typically took 15 to 20 years, which was the time it takes to educate a new generation. The second stage lasted 2 to 5 years, and the third only 2 to 6 months. In a 1984 interview, he noted that the first stage had already been achieved in the US and to a much greater degree than even Soviet authorities had anticipated. In 1950, McCarthy started exposing the widespread communist infiltration in the US government and society. However, by 1954, the Senate voted to censor him, effectively ending the government's efforts to root out communist influence. Today, McCarthyism is associated with political persecution, an indication that the left wing had successfully established dominance in the ideological struggle. In the 1930s, Italian communist Antonio Gramsci argued that to subvert Western society, socialists needed to wage a, quote, war of position, later known as the, quote, long march through the institutions. He believed that revolution couldn't succeed while people still had faith in the divine, so communists needed to recruit many foot soldiers who shared their vision of undermining morality, faith, and traditions. The proletarian revolution, he argued, must start by subverting religion, morality, and civilization. Marxist theories, especially those from the Frankfurt School, deeply influenced American universities. The school's founders, who fled Nazi Germany and came to the U.S., brought a Marxist philosophy aimed at dismantling Western civilization. Herbert Marcuse, for instance, promoted the rejection of traditional morality, authority, and societal norms, linking sexual liberation with political revolution. His ideas fueled the 1960s counterculture movement, which embraced drugs, sexual freedom, and anti-establishment values, pushing the belief that true freedom required rejecting all authority. This counterculture movement, with its emphasis on rebellion and hedonism, played into the hands of communist ideologues who sought to erode America's moral foundations. As radicalized students graduated, they entered influential roles in academia, media, and politics, continuing the cycle of Marxist indoctrination. This infiltration normalized radical ideologies within universities, turning them into centers of leftist thought and producing generations of students unknowingly committed to communist causes. Declassified Cold War documents and accounts from Soviet spies suggest that infiltration and subversion tactics were behind the counterculture movement of the 1960s. In The Naked Communist, W. Cleon Skousen wrote that one of the 45 communist goals is to, quote, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. The Communist Party recognized that, with a small number of people, they could organize crises and revolutions to their advantage. Lenin noted that labor unions serve as, quote, transmission belts from the Communist Party to the masses. By controlling unions, communists gained influence over votes, which in turn allowed them to pressure elected officials. Workers, forced to join unions to maintain basic rights and interests, became the union's pawns. Lodon explains how communists use unions and other groups to push their policies and influence democratic nations. First, the communist entity sets its agenda, such as strengthening labor laws. Next, unions adopt these policies and pressure parties like the Democratic Party to follow suit. Since unions often control these parties, the process becomes seamless. Then, as communist policies become union policies, they in turn become, quote, mainstream political party policies. Lodon noted in 2014 that this tactic has been used worldwide countless times. A hallmark of communist rule is a strict control of speech and thought. A similar mindset has recently begun to envelop the minds of the American left. Communism has, throughout time, used terms like political correctness, progress, and solidarity in order to restrain opposing speech and thought. This tendency to censor opposing views can be observed in the modern American left. Indeed, even the term progress has long been used by the Communist Party throughout history as a quasi-synonym for communism. The indoctrination of communist ideals in the West continues to this day. America is seen by many to be the last bastion of freedom in an increasingly globalized world. One can only hope that it continues to stay that way. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes. Join us next time as we continue to uncover the deeper truths hidden beneath the surface of our existence.